This Gemara on 6b, Vav Mebez of Brachos, is filled with different mitzvahs that really have to be reconsidered during this time of quarantine, COVID, semi-quarantine, just at a time when things are different. But the reason I looked here to begin with was for this Gemara, that Rabbi Chelbo said in the name of Rav Huna that anyone who benefits, participates in a feast, a wedding feast of a groom, a chassan and kala, but does not add to their joy at all, is violating the five voices, whatever that means: kol sasan, kol simcha, kol chassan, kol kala, kol omeruim, hodu es Hashem tzvakos. So that's the basic halacha, that if we're going to participate in a meal, that we have an obligation, literally, to be misameach the chassan and kala. So now this is different for us now, because even at a time, let's say during the worst part of the quarantine, when people would have a meal and everyone was so far apart, and there couldn't be the usual dancing and singing, and people couldn't even sit next to each other at the meal. So there were all sorts of questions about how do you fulfill this mitzvah without violating the five kolos. In other words, is there a way to add to the joy? So, and this is not talking about presents, and this is not talking about, even though I'm sure that adds to the joy, but even the Chafetz Chaim holds in his letters that if one goes to a wedding feast and simply eats, but doesn't actively participate in being misameach chassan kala, in adding to the joy of the bride and groom, that there's a great possibility that they're actually violating those sigzol, since you should not steal. So it's a serious concern. So the way I understand it now is as follows. Let's say the bride and groom are in the yichud room, or let's say the bride and groom are taking pictures. And so and often at weddings, before all this, people would sing and dance even while the bride and groom were not actually in the room. So there are modern poskim, meaning great poskim of the modern era, who hold that is considered fulfilling the mitzvah of being misameach chassan v'kala, adding to the joy of the bride and the groom, because you are enhancing the joy of the parents, of the people, of the bride and of the groom, and to be misameach the mechutanim, the families, is actually considered part of the mitzvah. Or let's say I'm at the wedding, but I don't stay for the meal. So then let's say I was at the smorgasbord, and I stay for the chuppah, but I leave before the meal. So the question is that considered eating of their meal, and therefore I have the obligation of the five voices, or I have to worry about those sigzal? So the Beis Shmuel holds that even a little bit of food makes you obligated. And he says that even if you're not actually participating in the meal, but you still have some sort of obligation by being present to add to the joy. So if there is a Zoom link to the wedding, and the chassan and the kala, or the parents, are happy that you're participating, you are fulfilling the mitzvah. If you are let's say, adding to the meal, not just the wedding gift, but you're doing something, you pay the caterer to add something to the feast, you are fulfilling the mitzvah of being misameach chassan v'kala. But it is, even though we may not be actively participating in a meal, let's say we're there over Zoom, we still have a mitzvah. So we're going to have to talk about this. Stay tuned.